The albino Omega sang to dying wolf beneath the ice. That night, Alpha King whispered her name Moon. The land itself seemed to mourn, as though the trees, the rivers, and even the stones felt the weight of winter's curse. Amid this cold, unforgiving world, there was one voice that rose above all, a voice as pale and fragile as the snowflakes that fell silently to the ground. Moon, the albino Omega, walked alone along the edge of the frozen lake, her white hair blending with the ice and snow around her. Her eyes, pale as winter moonlight, reflected both sorrow and a secret strength. She was an exile shunned by those who feared her gift, the gift of a voice that could stir the heart, soothe pain, or awaken life where there was none. In the villages, they whispered that her songs could call spirits, that her notes could bend the will of nature itself. But here in the empty wilds, Moon could sing freely without judgment or fear. She knelt by the ice's edge, listening to the faint, desperate sounds beneath the frozen surface. There was a movement, a struggle. Her heart clenched. Kneeling carefully, she pressed her hands to the ice, tracing the cracks that spiderwebbed across its frozen face. There, trapped and bleeding beneath the brittle ice, was a wolf. Its fur was dark as night, matted with frozen blood, and its eyes glimmered with both pain and fear. Moon's breath hitched. She had never seen such suffering, yet she had never felt a bond so immediate, so urgent. She whispered softly, "Hold on, little one. I am here." Her voice trembled at first, soft and fragile, then steadied as she began to sing. The song was low and haunting, carrying the sorrow of 1,000 silent nights. It wove through the air like smoke, curling around the ice and the wounded wolf, slipping into the frozen cracks and whispering promises of warmth and life. The wolf lifted its head slightly, ears pricking, as though it recognized the song as more than a sound, an invitation, a lifeline. Hours passed. Moon sang, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Her lips were pale, her fingers numb from the cold, but she could not stop. She poured herself into the song, into the hope that the creature beneath the ice could survive. And slowly, miraculously, the ice around the wolf began to shimmer, fine cracks spreading outward in delicate patterns. The wolf struggled, pressing against the ice with renewed strength. As the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the frozen lake, Moon finally felt the ice weaken enough for the wolf to break free. With a desperate push, the creature shattered the brittle barrier and emerged, gasping and shaking, but alive. Snow and ice fell in a glittering cascade, and Moon collapsed backward on the frozen ground, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The wolf shook its massive head, water and snow flying from its fur, and stared at her. Its eyes, once full of fear, now held something deeper, recognition, gratitude, and a silent understanding that their fates were somehow entwined. Moon reached out slowly, letting her hand hover just above its fur. The wolf leaned forward, pressing its wet nose to her palm. For a brief moment, the harshness of the world faded, replaced by a fragile, perfect silence. But the peace was short-lived. From the edge of the forest, shadows moved, subtle, deliberate, and chilling. Moon did not hear them at first, too caught up in the miracle she had just witnessed. But the wind shifted, carrying a scent she had never known, power, danger, and an unyielding presence. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the darkness where the trees loomed like silent sentinels. Then he appeared, Alpha King Valen. Tall, regal, and impossibly still, he emerged from the forest's edge as if born from shadow itself. His eyes, sharp and piercing, locked onto Moon and the wolf with a mixture of curiosity, caution, and something she could not yet name. He wore the armor of his kingdom, blackened steel etched with frost patterns that shimmered in the moonlight. His expression was unreadable, but every movement, every measured step, radiated authority and power. Moon instinctively drew back, stepping closer to the wolf, her voice still echoing with the lingering notes of her song. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Valen's eyes did not leave the wolf. "I am Valen, Alpha King of Veloria," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of 1,000 winters. "And you are the one they call Moon." The name felt like a shiver across her skin. She had been called many things: stranger, exile, albino, witch, but never by someone of such authority. Her heart pounded in her chest, equal parts fear and strange fascination. "You saved this creature," he continued, his gaze flicking between Moon and the wolf. "Do you know what it is you've done?" I only sang," she said softly, uncertain. "I didn't know it could," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The wolf, still trembling, nudged her hand as if to reassure her. Valen took a step closer, his boots crunching on the snow. "That was no ordinary song," he said, almost reverently. "Magic like yours is dangerous, it is feared, it is hunted, yet it is also powerful enough to alter fate itself." Moon swallowed hard. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. She had always known her voice carried risk, but she had never imagined it could reach the attention of a king. Her fingers shook as she touched the wolf again, drawing strength from its warmth. Valen's gaze softened slightly, though his expression remained guarded. "You have done something remarkable tonight," he said, "and yet I do not know whether to be grateful or wary." Moon's heart twisted at his words. She had spent her life feeling the sting of fear and rejection, and now here was a man who commanded kingdoms, standing before her, unsure whether to trust her. Yet there was something in his voice, something unspoken, that drew her in, a promise of understanding or perhaps of danger. The wolf stirred at her side, its dark eyes meeting Valen's for a moment. Then, with a low, rumbling growl, it turned and disappeared into the shadows of the forest, moving with a speed and grace that made Moon's breath catch. Valen's eyes followed the wolf until it vanished completely. Then, slowly, he turned to her. "It seems," he said, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper, "that your song has awakened something old and dangerous." Moon looked at him, fear and defiance warring within her. "I didn't mean to," she said. "I only wanted to help." Valen studied her, his expression unreadable in the silver light. Then, unexpectedly, he spoke her name again, softly, almost reverently. "Moon." The word hung in the air like a secret, heavy with power, and something inside her shifted. She had always felt alone, an exile with a voice that could heal or harm. But now, under the cold moonlight, she felt seen. Not just feared, not just shunned, but truly seen. Before either could speak again, the ice beneath their feet groaned and cracked. A sharp, violent sound that made Moon's heart leap into her throat. She stumbled backward, catching herself just as the ice split along a deep line that stretched toward the center of the frozen lake. The wind roared, carrying a surge of magic she could feel in her bones. Valen's eyes widened slightly, a rare break in his composure. "The magic," he murmured. "It reacts to you. You are more than a singer, Moon. You are something else entirely." Moon's voice trembled as she replied, "I don't understand. I only wanted to help." Valen took a step closer, his presence both comforting and terrifying. "No," he said, his tone firm but gentle. "You understand more than you realize. Tonight you have sung to fate itself, and it has answered." Moon looked down at the crack in the ice, fear and awe mingling in her chest. She did not know what had been awakened, nor what dangers might follow. But in that moment, as the wind whispered through the trees and the stars shimmered like distant fires, she understood one thing. Her life, and the life of the wolf, and perhaps even the fate of the kingdom, had changed forever. And then, before the silence could settle, a howl ripped through the night, a sound both familiar and strange, filled with pain, fury, and something almost human. Moon shivered. The wolf was not gone. It was watching, waiting, and its fate, now intertwined with hers, was far from certain. Valen whispered her name once more, softly, almost as if confessing a truth he had only just discovered. "Moon." The wind carried the word across the frozen lake, echoing through the trees, through the snow, and through the very heart of the kingdom. And in that echo, Moon felt something stir within her, a mixture of fear, longing, and the faintest spark of hope. The night had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The icy winds of Valoria's northern reaches had calmed, but the cold lingered like a shadow across the land. Moon had spent the night alone, wrapped in furs that did little to warm her spirit. Her thoughts were tangled with the memory of the wolf beneath the ice, its dark eyes staring at her with a depth she could not forget. And then there was Valen, the Alpha King, whose presence haunted her more than the winter itself. When the first light of dawn touched the snow, Moon found herself standing at the gates of Valen's palace. She did not know why she had come, only that the memory of his voice, whispering her name, had drawn her like a thread she could not resist. The palace rose before her like a fortress of frost and shadow, black stone etched with delicate frost patterns that gleamed in the pale sunlight. Guards, their armor dark and stern, stood at attention, their eyes filled with suspicion as she approached. A single nod from the tallest guard, and the heavy doors opened. Inside, the palace was vast and cold, the air smelling of iron, stone, and old magic. Moon felt a strange reverence as she stepped through the halls, her footsteps echoing softly on the marble floors. She was led to a chamber at the heart of the palace, where Valen waited, seated on his throne carved from black ice. His presence filled the room, not with warmth, but with a quiet, commanding power that made the very air tremble. "You came," he said simply, his voice low and measured, but there was a note of curiosity in it. I didn't know where else to go," Moon admitted, her fingers brushing the edge of her cloak nervously. "I need to know about the wolf." Valen rose slowly, moving with the elegance of a predator. His eyes studied her, sharp and unyielding. "That creature is not merely a wolf," he said. "It is a prince, cursed long before I was born. Its fate is entwined with our kingdom, and perhaps with you as well." Moon's breath caught. She had not expected this. A prince? Cursed? The questions formed in her mind faster than she could voice them, yet she hesitated. Something in Valen's gaze made her cautious. She had saved the wolf out of instinct, out of a desire to heal, not knowing she was stepping into forces far greater than herself. "The curse is ancient," Valen continued, pacing slowly before her. "It was placed by a rival who sought to undo my family and the line of our kings. The wolf, the prince, suffers endlessly, caught between life and death. And tonight you awoke part of that magic with your song." Moon's heart pounded. "Awoke the magic." "I didn't mean I just sang." Her voice faltered under his intense gaze. Valen stopped before her, studying her closely. "It is not about intention, Moon. Magic like yours does not heed intention. It responds to emotion, to will, to heart. And your heart, it is stronger than you know." She swallowed, feeling both fear and fascination. All her life she had been told to hide, to fear her voice, to avoid drawing attention. And now here she was, standing before the king of the frozen kingdom, her power acknowledged but also feared. "You are remarkable," Valen said, his tone softer now, almost gentle. "But dangerous. And the court, the people, they will not understand you. That is why I offer you a choice." Moon looked at him, unsure. "Choice?" "Yes," Valen said, leaning against the throne. "You may leave, remain an exile, free to wander the wilderness. Or you may stay here at my court and help break the curse that binds the Wolf Prince. In doing so, you will also gain protection and purpose." Moon's mind raced. The first option was familiar, lonely, uncertain, but safe. The second option was frightening, unknown, and dangerous. And yet, something deep inside her stirred at the thought of staying, of being needed, of using her gift for something greater than herself. I will help," she said finally, her voice firm despite the tremor of fear beneath it. Valen's eyes narrowed as though weighing her soul. "Very well, but know this, trust will not be given freely in my court. You must prove yourself not only to me but to the kingdom and to the prince whose fate you now share." Moon nodded, feeling a mixture of determination and anxiety. I will do my best." The days that followed were filled with study, observation, and careful introductions to the court. Moon learned that Valoria was a land steeped in superstition and fear. Courtiers whispered behind her back, their eyes full of suspicion and curiosity. Some mocked her, calling her the ghost girl, while others watched in awe, uncertain whether to fear or revere her. Valen, ever watchful, never left her side entirely. He observed her with a mixture of fascination and caution, his expressions unreadable, yet his presence a constant reminder that she was not alone in her struggle. Their interactions were a delicate dance, questions and answers, lessons and guidance, tension and unspoken desire. Neither dared speak fully of what they felt, yet every glance, every word carried the weight of meaning. Then, one night, a messenger arrived, breathless and trembling, carrying news from the northern forests. "Your Majesty," the messenger said, bowing low, "the wolf prince he has been spotted, alive but in great danger. He roams the frozen woods, pursued by dark forces unknown." Valen's expression hardened. "He is closer than I feared," he said, turning to Moon. "It seems our journey begins sooner than expected." Moon felt a thrill of fear and excitement. I will go," she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "I will find him." Valen studied her, his gaze searching. "It will not be easy. The forest is alive with magic, some of it hostile. You must be careful, Moon, and trust must be absolute, for the path ahead will test both of us." The journey into the forest began at dawn. Moon rode beside Valen on a black horse that moved as silently as a shadow. The trees loomed above them, twisted and ancient, their branches like skeletal hands stretching toward the sky. Snow crunched beneath the hooves, echoing in the quiet like distant drums. Moon's heart was heavy with anticipation. She thought of the wolf prince, trapped between worlds, and of the magic that had awakened in her song. And she thought of Valen, whose presence both intimidated and comforted her. She did not yet understand the depth of the connection between them, nor the storm of emotions that would soon follow, but the seed had been planted. They traveled for hours, guided by faint tracks in the snow and the whispers of the wind, until they reached a clearing. There in the silver light of the winter moon they saw him, the wolf prince, his form shifting between man and beast, caught in the throes of the curse. His eyes glowed faintly, filled with confusion and pain. Moon stepped forward cautiously. "It's okay," she said softly. "I am here, you are safe." The wolf prince growled low, a sound of warning and fear, yet he did not flee. Something in her voice seemed to reach him as it had under the ice. Valen stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose. Together, they approached the wolf prince. Moon's heart ached at the sight of his suffering. She knelt in the snow, placing her hands on the frozen ground, and began to sing once more. The song was slow, tender, and haunting, carrying the warmth of life into the cold night. The wolf prince trembled at the sound, and gradually, the shifting magic that bound him began to falter. His form wavered, caught between human and beast, but Moon's voice held him steady. Valen watched closely, ready to intervene if danger arose, yet he remained still, allowing the song to work its quiet miracle. Hours passed. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Moon sang, the wind carrying her notes through the trees, through the snow, and into the heart of the cursed prince. Slowly, the glow in his eyes softened, the tension in his body eased, and the human form beneath the wolf began to emerge. Finally, exhausted but determined, Moon fell to her knees, her voice fading into silence. The wolf prince collapsed onto the snow, breathing heavily, his human eyes blinking in confusion and awe. He was free for now. Valen approached cautiously. "He is alive," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But the curse is not yet fully broken. There is more work to be done." Moon looked at him, her own exhaustion mingled with relief. "I will do whatever it takes," she said softly. "I will not fail him." Valen's gaze met hers, and for the first time his expression softened completely. "I know," he said, "and perhaps in this we will both find what we have been seeking." The three of them, Moon, Valen, and the Wolf Prince, stood together in the moonlit clearing, the forest around them silent and watchful. Danger still lurked, and the path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time hope flickered in the frozen night. And as Moon looked at Valen, and then at the Wolf Prince, she realized that their fates were bound together in ways none of them could yet understand. The forest whispered, the snow shimmered, and the night held its breath, as if the kingdom itself waited for the next move in this tale of magic, power, and the fragile, growing bond between them. The forest beyond Valoria's palace was alive with whispers. Every tree seemed to watch, every shadow stretched longer than it should, and the snow underfoot crunched in rhythm with Moon's heart. She rode beside Valen, his dark eyes scanning the twisting path ahead. Between them, a fragile silence carried the weight of unsaid thoughts, trust not yet earned but slowly forming like frost along the edges of a window. The Wolf Prince, now mostly human but still bearing the wild grace of the beast he had been, walked beside them, his movements cautious. He was tall and lean, his dark hair falling in damp strands over pale, sharp features. He did not speak much, but his eyes followed Moon wherever she went, a mixture of gratitude, fear, and something deeper, something unspoken that pulled at her heart. The journey into the forest was not easy. The trees grew closer, their branches entwined as though guarding secrets they did not wish to share. Shadows twisted in corners of Moon's vision, shifting shapes that vanished when she blinked. Valen's presence was a constant reassurance, yet she sensed his unease as well. He moved with the quiet strength of a predator, every sense alert, every motion precise. "We are close," Valen said at last, his voice low, almost a whisper against the wind. "The heart of the curse lies deeper in the forest. If we are to break it, we must confront it directly." Moon swallowed hard. "And what is at the heart?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite the effort to steady it. Valen's eyes darkened. "Pain, fear, and the memories of those who were trapped before him, before the prince. It is a place of trial." "Magic unlike anything you have faced." Moon nodded. She felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a cloak. Her voice had already awakened part of the curse once. Now she would have to confront its full power. Her hands tightened into fists. She had faced exile, scorn, and fear. She would face this too. The forest grew colder the deeper they went. Even the snow seemed sharper, biting through layers of cloth and leather. The wind moaned like distant spirits, and faint shapes flickered between the trees, shadows of creatures neither entirely alive nor dead. Moon felt her heart pound with every step, yet she did not falter. She had something stronger than fear now, hope, and a growing bond with Valen and the Wolf Prince that steadied her. At last they reached a clearing. Moon gasped. Before them was a frozen lake, larger and darker than any she had seen. Its surface shimmered, reflecting the moonlight like black glass. At its center, a circle of frost glowed faintly, pulsing with a strange energy that seemed to pull at her very soul. "This is it," Valen said, dismounting his horse. "The heart of the curse. Step carefully." The Wolf Prince hesitated at the edge of the frozen lake. It is cold," he said, his voice low. "I can feel the magic. It is alive." Moon nodded. She stepped forward, her boots crunching on the icy ground. The air seemed to hum with energy, and her skin prickled as if the forest itself was watching her. She took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice rose slowly, low and haunting, carrying warmth into the cold night. The song spread across the lake, slipping over the ice, curling around the frost circle at the center. Moon felt the magic respond to her, shivering through her body, twisting and resisting. The curse did not want to be broken. It fought her, tugging at her energy, threatening to overwhelm her. Valen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers briefly, a touch full of reassurance and unspoken trust. "Do not falter," he said quietly. "I am here." Moon drew strength from him. She focused on the wolf prince, on the life within him, on the hope that still burned despite the curse. Her voice grew stronger, more certain, weaving a melody that touched the edges of the forest, reaching into the heart of the frost. The wolf prince stirred, his body shaking as the magic within him rebelled. Pain twisted his features and he cried out, a sound that was part human, part wolf. Moon's heart ached, but she did not stop. She sang louder, her voice carrying not only warmth, but understanding, compassion, and the promise of freedom. The frost circle at the center of the lake cracked and shimmered. Light spilled across the ice, bending and dancing in strange, beautiful patterns. Moon felt herself grow weary, her energy draining as the magic resisted her. Her knees shook and she stumbled, but Valen caught her, holding her steady. "You are stronger than you know," he said. "Do not give in to fear. Do not let it take you." Moon nodded, closing her eyes. She focused on the wolf prince, on the hope they all carried. She let her heart pour into her song, letting the magic flow through her, through the ice, through the curse itself. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the frost circle erupted in a dazzling explosion of light, ice cracking and shattering outward in intricate patterns. Snow and wind whipped around them, and the wolf prince collapsed onto the ice, panting heavily. Moon fell to her knees, exhausted. Her voice was gone, replaced by the pounding of her heart. She looked at Valen, who had stayed by her side the entire time, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of awe and relief. The wolf prince slowly lifted his head. He looked at Moon, and for the first time his eyes were clear. The wildness, the pain, the curse, all of it was fading. I am free," he whispered, his voice trembling with disbelief and gratitude. Moon smiled weakly, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "Yes," she said softly. "You are free." Valen stepped forward, placing a hand on the wolf prince's shoulder. "But the journey is not over," he said. "The magic may still linger. The curse is weakened, but it is not gone entirely. We must be vigilant." Moon nodded, her exhaustion giving way to a new determination. She had faced fear, danger, and magic beyond her understanding, and she had survived. She had saved the wolf prince, and in doing so, had begun to understand the true power of her own voice. As they stood together in the moonlit clearing, a strange silence settled over the forest. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Moon looked at Valen and then at the wolf prince and felt a bond forming between them. A bond forged in danger, trust, and the shared experience of magic and pain. Valen's gaze met hers, and for a moment the weight of command, responsibility, and isolation fell away. In his eyes, Moon saw something she had not expected: trust, admiration, and perhaps something deeper, something she had been too afraid to recognize until now. "You have done well," he said quietly, his voice softer than before. "Stronger than I expected. And perhaps more than I dared hope." Moon's heart fluttered, a mixture of fear and longing. She had spent her life hiding, afraid of her own power, afraid of being seen. And now, standing in the heart of a forest alive with magic, she felt seen, not for her gifts alone, but for who she was. The wolf prince stirred again, slowly standing. He looked at Moon with a tentative smile, the first warmth in his expression since the curse had begun. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not giving up on me." Moon nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Her voice, though weary, carried a quiet strength. "You are stronger than you know," she said, "and you are not alone anymore." Valen watched them, his expression unreadable. But Moon could see the faintest trace of a smile, and a softness in his eyes that had not been there before. For all his power, for all his authority, he too had been changed by the night's events, by her song, by the courage they had all shown. The forest seemed to relax around them, the tension easing as if acknowledging the shift in power and magic. The curse had been weakened, the wolf prince freed, and something had awakened in Moon, an understanding of her voice, her strength, and the bond she now shared with both the king and the prince. But even in the quiet, a faint unease lingered. The forest held secrets still, and the magic of Veloria was never fully tamed. Moon knew that this victory was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more dangers, and more choices that would test their hearts and their trust. And yet, as she looked at Valen and the wolf prince standing together beside her, she felt something she had never felt before: hope. Hope that they could face whatever came next. Hope that the bonds they had forged would carry them through the darkness. Hope that even in a kingdom of ice and shadow, warmth could be found in the hearts of those who dared to trust and to love. Moon took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, and allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she believed that they could survive it together. And as the moonlight shimmered across the shattered ice, casting patterns of light and shadow that danced like spirits across the snow, Moon understood one undeniable truth. The breaking of the curse was also the breaking of barriers, between power and vulnerability, fear and trust, loneliness and connection. Tonight, the forest had witnessed courage, magic, and the fragile beginnings of redemption. And tomorrow, the kingdom would see the rising of something new, something shaped by Moon, Valen, and the freed prince, bound together by song, sacrifice, and the choices that had yet to come. The first rays of dawn touched the kingdom of Veloria, and for the first time in many weeks, the sun seemed to pierce the eternal winter. Snow glimmered like shards of crystal, and the icy wind carried a sense of calm, though a faint chill remained. Moon stood at the edge of the palace terrace, wrapped in a thick cloak, her pale hair catching the light. She watched the horizon, thinking of all that had happened: the song beneath the ice, the cursed wolf prince, and the shadows that had haunted them in the forest. Beside her, Valen emerged from the palace doors. His black cloak rustled in the wind, and his expression was quiet, almost contemplative. When he saw Moon, his sharp eyes softened slightly. He did not speak immediately, only joined her at the edge of the terrace, standing close enough for their shoulders to brush. "You stayed through the night," Moon said softly, her voice carrying in the crisp morning air. "I needed to see you," Valen replied simply. His gaze followed the rising sun, but she could feel the weight of his presence, steady and unwavering. Moon looked at him, wondering how someone so commanding could feel so human. There was still distance, still caution, but she sensed an unspoken bond growing between them. The forest had tested them, and the magic had drawn them closer in ways neither could yet name. "The wolf prince," she said, turning to him. "Is he safe?" Valen's eyes darkened with thought. "Safe for now. The curse has been weakened, but its magic lingers. It will take time and care before he is free entirely, but he is strong. And you have done more than anyone could ask. Your voice, it has changed everything." Moon felt a faint warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and relief. She had always doubted herself, always feared that her gift was more curse than blessing. But now, standing beside the king of the kingdom she had only recently entered, she realized that her power could bring hope, not only to others but to herself. Valen turned to her, his expression unreadable. "There is something else you should know," he said, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "The curse is magic, it is tied to the kingdom itself. If it had fully taken hold, it could have spread beyond the prince. You have not only saved him, but you have protected Veloria as well." Moon's heart raced. I did not know it could reach so far," she admitted, her fingers brushing the edge of her cloak nervously. "I only wanted to help him." "And you have," Valen said. "More than you realize. You are remarkable, Moon, and dangerous, yes, but in the way that the kingdom needs." Moon looked at him, her pale eyes searching his dark ones. There was something unspoken in the air, a promise, a tension, a bond that neither had dared name. She had been alone for so long, feared and shunned. But here, in the cold light of dawn, she felt seen, not just for her magic, but for who she was and for the courage she had shown. "Thank you," she whispered, almost inaudible over the wind. For trusting me." Valen's gaze softened. "Trust must be earned," he said. "And you have earned mine, perhaps more than mine. I cannot say yet what the future holds, but I know this: you are not alone anymore." Moon's heart fluttered, a mixture of fear and hope. She had never known companionship like this. Not in the villages that had feared her, not in the wilderness where she had wandered alone. And now, with Valen by her side and the Wolf Prince slowly regaining his humanity, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than any fear. The Wolf Prince approached, his movements cautious but steady. He had grown taller, stronger, and more human in the past days, though the wildness in his eyes remained, a reminder of the magic that had shaped him. He looked at Moon, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper in his gaze. "I owe you my life," he said quietly, "and perhaps more than life. You have shown me what it means to be free and to trust." Moon smiled softly. "You are not alone either," she said. "We are all bound together now by magic, by choice, and by the paths we have walked together." Valen watched them, silent but attentive. The bond between them, the fragile trust, the shared courage, was something even he had not anticipated. He had come into this journey certain of his power, certain of his control, and yet he had been changed. By Moon's voice, by the Wolf Prince's struggle, by the courage that had refused to bend under the weight of magic and danger. "Moon," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm, "the kingdom will need your strength, and you may need ours as well. Do you understand?" Moon nodded. "I understand," she said, "and I am ready." The days that followed were filled with quiet work. Moon taught the Wolf Prince to control the remnants of the curse within him, guiding him with patience and song. Valen remained vigilant, protecting them from unseen threats and ensuring that the palace remained safe. Together, they moved through the kingdom, visiting villages where the cold had caused suffering, offering healing and hope. The bond between Moon and Valen grew with each passing day. They walked together through the snow-dusted gardens, spoke quietly by candlelight, and shared long silences where words were unnecessary. There was an unspoken understanding between them, of trust, of admiration, and of a deep, growing respect that neither dared to name outright. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Moon and Valen stood at the edge of the palace terrace once more. The snow glowed faintly in the twilight, and the wind carried the scent of distant pine and frost. "You have changed the kingdom," Valen said quietly, his eyes on the horizon, "and perhaps you have changed me as well." Moon felt her heart skip. "Changed you?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Valen turned to her, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Yes," he said. "I have lived long in this palace, surrounded by power and fear. I have commanded, I have ruled, and I have isolated myself. But you have reminded me that strength is not only in power, but in trust, in courage, and in connection." Moon's breath caught. She had never thought a king could speak so openly, so honestly. And yet here he was, vulnerable in a way that did not diminish him but made him more real, more human. I never meant to change anyone," she said softly. "I only wanted to help the prince and to survive myself." "And yet you have," Valen said, "and perhaps that is the true measure of your strength." The Wolf Prince approached, now fully human and standing tall beside them. He looked at Moon, then at Valen, and nodded. "We have all been changed," he said, "by magic, by courage, and by each other. The curse has taken much from me, but it has given us all something as well, the chance to see what matters and to choose what is right." Moon felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet hope. They had faced fear, danger, and magic beyond their understanding, and they had survived. The curse was broken, the Wolf Prince free, and Valoria itself seemed to breathe easier. Valen's hand brushed hers, a brief, fleeting touch that carried more meaning than words could express. Moon looked at him, feeling a surge of emotion she had long kept buried: trust, respect, and a quiet, growing affection. "The kingdom will remember this winter," Valen said softly, "and perhaps in time it will remember the courage that changed it." Moon nodded. And the song, she said, the song that brought hope to the ice. Valen's eyes softened. Yes, the song that brought hope to the ice. They stood together, three figures in the moonlit snow, the albino Omega, the Alpha King, and the freed prince. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the echoes of their journey, the trials they had faced, and the bonds they had formed. Moon took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, and allowed herself a quiet smile. The past had been harsh, filled with fear and isolation, but now there was hope. There was trust. There was the possibility of love, quiet and steadfast, growing between them like fragile ice flowers in the snow. The Wolf Prince placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and camaraderie. Valen stepped closer, his dark eyes meeting hers, steady and unflinching. And Moon knew in the depths of her heart that they were no longer bound by fear, nor by curse, nor by isolation. They were bound by courage, by choice, and by the fragile, enduring power of hope. The snow shimmered in the moonlight, the wind carried distant whispers, and the kingdom itself seemed to exhale. Valoria had endured the winter, and now it would see the rising of something new, shaped by the courage of three souls who dared to face magic, darkness, and their own hearts. And as Moon looked at Valen, and then at the Wolf Prince, she understood one undeniable truth. The greatest magic was not in curses or power, but in the choices they had made, the trust they had given, and the love that had quietly, steadily begun to grow. The kingdom was changing, the curse was fading, and the night held a promise of dawn, of redemption, renewal, and the fragile beauty of hearts that had found their way to each other. Moon whispered softly, almost to herself, "We have survived together." Valen's voice joined hers, low and steady, carrying both command and care. Together. And in that word, in that quiet acknowledgement, the journey of winter, magic, and song found its gentle, enduring close.